Here today at McGill University for the CETA conference with Professor Kurt Huebner. He's an expert in EU integration and global political economy at the University of British Columbia. Thank you for being with us today, Professor Huebner.
Thank you very much.
What are the main goals of the conference today?
This opportunity today at this conference at McGill is very much to make a first assessment of the final text, to look into those details, also to give a kind of general impressions what the future may look like, what CETA will bring in cost, in benefits for both sides.
Now that the CETA has been signed, what are your impressions on what will be the biggest benefits for Canadian and European companies?
Yeah, I mean, we have only signed so far the end of negotiations, so there are still ratification processes coming. But having said that, let's assume CETA would come exactly in the form we find it now, between those many hundreds of pages. There will be, obviously, first of all, it's a great achievement. It provides a huge framework on very many levels, not only trade in goods and services. We have a chapter on foreign direct investment. We have a lot of other chapters dealing with non-tariff barriers, regulatory cooperation, environment, labor. So it's really, in this sense, a very comprehensive agreement. From the very beginning, both sides, EU and Canada, came up with a so-called joint study. This was an econometric simulation of a kind of best case scenario. What would be the effects for the European side and the effects for the Canadian side in terms of employment, additional GDP due to more trade in goods and services and more foreign direct investments. And those figures have since then been circulated. They have to be taken a bit careful, but having said that, CETA we should see in the best way as a huge window of opportunities. So in this window of opportunity is open because it will be an agreement signed by both sides. The question then is how to make use of those opportunities. And this is probably more a challenge for Canada than for the economies of the European Union, mainly due to the fact that Canadian exporters so far very much are focused on the United States of America. Those are the business models they are very much familiar with. They're dealing with other parts of the world, but not in a very prominent way. So Europe, the EU, a huge market, the largest market in the global economy, is a very mature market on average. Means there are high standards, competition will be very strong, and it will be up to Canadian exporters plus a policy responses, policy support on all levels to make the Canadian economy as competitive as possible in terms of productivity, in terms of innovation, in terms of fine-tuning their products, so they are able to make use of this great chance.
Can you share with us how the investor-state dispute mechanism is affecting the ratification process in the European Union member states, and how will this unfold in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, this is a relatively new development, more or less triggered by some political excitement in Germany. It's a bit paradox because bilateral investment agreements, including this particular mechanism, have been generated and originated in Germany actually in the 1950s. And Germany has a huge number of those bilateral agreements that already include ISDS as a principle and as a mechanism. So I think so. We have to understand the change in sentiments. Not only in Europe, but also in Europe, in this particular case in Germany. Germany, where open trade is a part of its political DNA, so to say. But still, there are concerns, and they have very much to do with national sovereignty, the ability of nation states, of governments, to make decisions that are valid in their own jurisdiction and can be posed into question from outside. And this is very much the problem with ISDS, that the way it has been set up has at least a potential to undermine sovereignty. And I think so there may be exaggerations on the side of the public in Germany and other parts of Europe, but we have to accept that this is the perception, and perceptions are forming its own reality. And so this is the situation that this mechanism has come into the debate. It's interesting to see that the outgoing European Commission didn't care too much for a long time about the investment chapter. It has to do with the fact that the Trade Commissioner of the European Commission, Karel de Gucht, is very much a super liberalizer who has not had any kind of intentions to reflect possible disadvantages of this mechanism. This is changing now due to the political debate. The EU Commission President Juncker has already signaled that he would be willing to think twice about the necessity to include ISDS in TTIP. That's the agreement that is being negotiated with the US. And this may have implications for CETA. And also changed a bit the kind of competencies of the European Commission. The EU Trade Commissioner will not have the same kind of saying in terms of the investment chapter than the previous one. So there's another level included in making decisions about ISDS. So this already indicates there are problems. I personally think so. If you look at the text more carefully, that the CETA ISDS clause is much more careful. It's not as open for the interest of businesses like previous formulations of this particular mechanism. So I think so there will be lines of compromise, and it will be up to national governments to explain to their national audiences in better ways that this may be acceptable. But ratifications come with a lot of uncertainties, and if a CETA would be seen as a so-called mixed agreement, then it would need to get ratified also by national parliaments. And then we have 28 discussions about the value or non-value of ISDS. And so it's an open game a bit. We will see how this unfolds. The outgoing Commissioner of Trade, de Gucht, just made his last kind of tactical step to move a other agreement with Singapore that includes the same element to the European Court of Justice, and we will see how the European Court of Justice is thinking about this. So it's now in the kind of legal debate, but at the same time, I think so more important than this legal debate will be the political debate about all this. And there's a lot for the national governments to explain it much better to their national audiences.
And we'll be watching this from Canada very closely. Professor Huebner is a professor at the University of British Columbia and Canada-Europe Transatlantic Dialogue collaborator. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Marcel.
And enjoy the conference.